Hi everyone, I'm Rob Shapiro from Fitchburg State University, and this is the BACB's 5th edition task list G2, Use Interventions Based on Motivating Operations and Discriminative Stimuli. So for starters, just a quick review of motivating operations. A motivating operation is an environmental variable that temporarily alters the reinforcing or punishing effectiveness of some stimulus, which we can think of as the value-altering effect, and the frequency of all behavior that has been previously reinforced or punished by that event, which we can think of as the behavior-altering effect. So trying to tease those two components out of a motivating operation, the value-altering effects and the behavior-altering effects, value-altering effects can either be establishing operations or abolishing operations, sometimes referred to as EOs or AOs. And for establishing operations, they temporarily increase the value of the reinforcer. And abolishing operations temporarily decrease the value of the reinforcer. We can think about this in terms of those words establish and abolish, right? It establishes something as a reinforcer. It makes it more valuable as a reinforcer, or it abolishes it, it removes it, eliminates it, makes it less valuable as a reinforcer. So the value-altering effects are establishing operations and abolishing operations. And then the behavior-altering effects we can think of as evocative effects or abative effects. And evocative effects temporarily increase the frequency of behavior that has resulted in the delivery of the reinforcer, whereas abative effects temporarily decrease the frequency of behavior that has resulted in the delivery of the reinforcer. And again, much as we did with the EOs and the AOs, we can think of evocative as it evokes behavior, it makes behavior happen, it increases the frequency of that behavior, whereas abative effects, when something abates, it happens less, it decreases or it discontinues. So abative effects temporarily decrease the frequency of behavior that has resulted in the delivery of the reinforcer. And these two are going to occur together when we're talking about motivating operations. So if we've got a value-altering effect of an establishing operation, it's going to result in an evocative effect. And if the value-altering effect is that of an abolishing operation, it's going to have an abative effect. So the value, again, is establishing operations and abolishing operations. Behavior-altering is evocative or abative. The key point to remember here in the difference between value-altering and behavior-altering effects, we always have both of them when we're talking about motivating operations. But if we're talking about establishing operations and abolishing operations, that always has to do with the value of the reinforcer. And evocative effects or abative effects always have to do with changes in behavior that in the past have led to the reinforcer. So again, establishing and abolishing operations have to do with the reinforcer and how valuable it is. Evocative effects and abative effects always have to do with behavior. Does the behavior happen more or happen less? When we think about using motivating operations effectively, it's important to remember that because they temporarily alter the value of a reinforcer as well as the behavior that has previously led to that reinforcer, it's really important to make sure that we're using them effectively anytime we're targeting behavior change. And if we think about this, it should make sense because increasing the value of a reinforcer can help increase desired behaviors that have led to that behavior. By having an establishing operation, it can help result in an evocative effect. Likewise, decreasing the value of a reinforcer and abolishing operation can help decrease undesired behaviors that have led to that reinforcer. So we can occasion an abative effect for behavior that we're trying to decrease. But it's also important to be careful because if we're not careful, we can accidentally have motivating operations work against us by delivering too much of a reinforcer when desired behavior occurs, or by limiting access to a reinforcer that maintains undesired behavior. So if we're not careful and if we're not paying attention to motivating operations, we can actually set up contingencies that work against us. If we think about decreasing undesired behavior by using motivating operations effectively, if we can determine what the function of an undesired behavior is, right, essentially why someone's doing it, what they're getting from it, we can take steps to make that reinforcer less valuable and as a result, occasion less of the undesired behavior. And methods of making a reinforcer less valuable can include things like free access or non-contingent reinforcement, sometimes abbreviated NCR, which essentially, the more we make a reinforcer readily available, the less valuable it becomes. And we can think of this in terms of, if we were thinking unconditioned motivating operations, in terms of satiation. So essentially, the more of something there is around, the less valuable it becomes, and so the less likely someone is to engage in behavior to get that. At a very basic level, if we give somebody a whole bunch of water to drink, maybe in the beginning they're thirsty, but eventually they're not thirsty anymore, and so water stops becoming valuable. So they're less likely to engage in behavior that would result in water, such as seeking out a water fountain or asking for water at a restaurant. We can also make a reinforcer less valuable through the use of functional communication training or other kind of teaching of a replacement behavior. And it's essentially, it also works with satiation, because the more ways a person has to gain access to whatever the reinforcing outcome is, the more they'll actually access it. And so the less valuable it becomes. And so this is a really nice step that's probably a more sophisticated intervention than free access or non-contingent reinforcement, because with functional communication or other replacement behavior training, we're not just operating with satiation. We're also working with teaching a replacement behavior that then, when there is a motivating operation in effect, the learner has a more effective, hopefully, and more socially appropriate way to gain access to whatever the reinforcer is. On the flip side, if we think about trying to increase desired behavior by using motivating operations effectively, again, if we're able to determine the function of a desired behavior, we can take steps to make that reinforcer more valuable and occasion more of the desired behavior. So exactly the flip side of trying to decrease behavior, if we want to increase behavior by using motivating operations, we can think about what do we need to do to make whatever the reinforcer is as valuable as possible, so it increases the likelihood that someone's going to engage in behavior that's led to it. And we can do this in a couple of ways. Number one, sort of the flip side of having free access, we can do it by limiting access. The less a reinforcer is readily available, the more valuable it becomes. And essentially what we're talking about here is deprivation. So going back to our water example from satiation, on the flip side, if someone hasn't had access to water for a long time, and they're as a result they become really thirsty, they're more likely, the more deprived they are, the more they are likely to try to engage in behavior that in the past has led to access to water, to do things like seeking out a water fountain or asking someone else for water. We can also make a reinforcer more valuable through exposure to other stimuli. So by exposing a person to some stimuli, it can make other stimuli more valuable. And this, typically we can think about this in terms of unconditioned motivating operations, those things that operate on the species as a whole. If we go back to our water example here for a minute. So we could make water more valuable by restricting access to water, and that results in thirst and makes someone more likely to engage in behavior to get water. But we could also do it, and this is something that happens at movie theaters and happens at sporting events, is you get someone to eat the popcorn, right? And the popcorn is incredibly salty. And really, a big part of the reason for that is that the more someone is accessing really salty popcorn, it increases the value of drinks. So it could be water or soda in a movie theater, beer at a sporting event. But the more you expose someone to salty foods, the more valuable some means of quenching thirst becomes. So we can do it through that kind of exposure to other stimuli, but we can also do it through conditioned motivating operations, specifically thinking of CMOTs, transitive conditioned motivating operations. And we think of these are things that are not operating at the species level, but it still is exposure to one stimulus that as a result, it makes access to a different stimulus more valuable. And if we think about this, an example of this, let's say that you got introduced to somebody and you're talking with them and you're getting along and you feel like you want to continue the conversation or you want to see them down the road at some point, and they say to you, "Oh yeah, let me give you my phone number," okay, and that is going to make things that let you able to record that person's phone number more valuable, okay? And let's say you don't have your phone on you to enter it in contacts, okay? So you're going to have to actually write the phone number down by hand. All of a sudden, it makes access to a pen and a piece of paper more valuable. Okay, so you could have a situation where the pen and the piece of paper were always available in the environment, but until someone said, "Hey, let me give you my phone number," now all of a sudden those reinforcers are more valuable, and as a result, behavior that's led to them seeking out that pen and that piece of paper become more likely to happen. So now shifting over for a minute from motivating operations to discriminative stimuli. A discriminative stimulus is a stimulus in the presence of which a given behavior has been reinforced and in the absence of which that behavior has not been reinforced. And as a result, the stimulus evokes behavior because it signals the availability of reinforcement. Okay, so when the stimulus is present, I engage in behavior and it gets reinforced. When the stimulus is not present and I engage in the behavior, I don't get reinforced. It's placed on extinction in that situation. And this increases behavior, it evokes behavior because it signals the availability of reinforcement. And that's really this key distinction between motivating operations and discriminative stimuli. They both can increase behavior, but motivating operations do it by increasing the value of a reinforcer. Okay, nothing changes about whether a reinforcer is available. It just becomes more valuable with motivating operations. While discriminative stimuli increase behavior by signaling the availability of a reinforcer. Nothing changes about the value of that reinforcer. It's just something that signals whether it's available for engaging in behavior. So we can think about this. One that comes to mind is for those of you that are familiar with Krispy Kreme donuts. When the donuts are just being made and they're sort of fresh out of the oven and available, there's a light that'll pop up on the outside of the Krispy Kreme store that basically says, "Hey, we've got hot donuts available now." Okay, so you're driving down the road and you're really hungry. Okay, the hunger is motivating operation. Okay, you haven't eaten in a while. That's going to increase the value of food and increase behavior that in the past has led to food. Now you're driving down the road and you're hungry and you see the light on a Krispy Kreme store that says, "Hey, hot donuts are available now." Ooh, that signals the availability. That's my discriminative stimulus that going into Krispy Kreme will get me access to a hot donut. Okay, so if either of those things don't happen, if you are not hungry at all, you're completely satiated, you just ate, maybe you just had a bunch of donuts, you might still pull in because they're delicious, right? But you're less likely to do it because the motivation isn't there. The motivating operation isn't in effect, okay? Or you might be really hungry and driving by, but you only like Krispy Kreme donuts when they're hot. When they're not hot anymore, they're just fine. They're just donuts. I'll get something else, right? But now I see the light on that lets me know that, ooh, hot donuts are available, so I'm going to pull in so I can get one. Okay, so both of those things, the hunger and the light, can increase the likelihood of behavior, but they do it for different reasons. The motivating operation, the hunger, does it because it makes the reinforcer more valuable. The light on does it because it signals, hey, reinforcement is available if I engage in this behavior. So in terms of using discriminative stimuli and developing stimulus control, there are a couple of things to think about. One is stimulus discrimination training, and then we'll get into conditional discrimination training. So with stimulus discrimination training, we're essentially using a multiple schedule. Responses that occur in the presence of one stimulus, an SD, or discriminative stimulus, are reinforced, while responses in the presence of one or more other stimuli, which are referred to as S deltas, are not. And you can see I've written out S delta here, but the symbol for delta is typically it's the Greek delta, which is a little triangle. So responses in the presence of one stimulus, the SD, are reinforced, while responses in the presence of one or more other stimuli, the S deltas, are not. So if we think about this in terms of really simple, just like animal research, is that maybe we've got a pigeon. And there's a light in the Skinner box where the pigeon is, and there's a disc that can be pecked. Okay, and when the light is green, a peck on the disc results in food being delivered. When the light is red, a peck on the disc does not result in food being delivered. You're going to have a pigeon that learns to peck the disc when the light is green and not peck the disc when the light is red. Okay, and this is about discrimination training. The green light has become the SD, and the red light has become the S delta. Okay, but we can also think about conditional discrimination training, which it's essentially matching to sample, where depending on what the sample stimulus is, different responses are reinforced and other responses are not. So let's go back to our pigeon. And now what we have is a situation where we've got our light that's either going to be green or it's going to be red, but now we have two discs. We have a disc on the left and a disc on the right. Okay, and the situation is when the light is green, pecks on the left disc get reinforced. Pecks on the right disc do not. When the light is red, pecks on the right disc get reinforced. Pecks on the left disc do not. Okay, so now we've got this conditional discrimination where the pigeon has to discern what color the light is it green or red, and allocate responding accordingly. So it's not as simple as I respond in this situation and I get it. I respond in another situation and I don't. It's when it's this particular response gets reinforced and others don't. But when it's something different, these other responses get reinforced and others don't. Okay, so that's it's a more complex level of discrimination training. And when we think about with both of these, if we're looking to establish stimulus control, there are some factors that we have to consider that might affect our ability to help a learner develop stimulus control. And one is pre-attending skills. So the person has to be able to engage in orienting behaviors, such as looking at materials. Okay, so if we're looking to do some kind of discrimination training, we need to make sure that the learner that we're working with is actually able to attend to what we're doing, right? They have to be able to focus for at least a relatively limited period of time. Have to be able to be on point. And if they're not able to do that, if they don't have those pre-attending skills, we are probably not going to be successful starting off with trying to develop stimulus control. We're probably much better off going back and first teaching and reinforcing those pre-attending skills before we even get to discrimination training. Also, stimulus salience. The more prominent a stimulus is, the more it draws the attention of the learner, the more likely stimulus control is to occur. And in some ways, this goes hand in hand with those pre-attending skills. The person has to be able to attend and orient. We can think of this in a vacuum, that someone needs to have those basic skills. But for any of us, the less prominent a stimulus is in the environment, the more other things are competing for the learner's attention, the more difficult it is to be able to establish stimulus control. So we want that stimulus to be as salient and prominent in the environment as possible. We can also think about the potential for over-selective stimulus control. And this is a case where with compound stimuli, the learner may focus on a minute feature of the stimulus which negatively impacts stimulus control. So essentially we can have a situation where the learner is focusing on something that is present in all of the stimuli that we are that we're looking to establish stimulus control, but really isn't the critical stimulus there, and as a result, we struggle with establishing stimulus control. So let's say, for example, that we're trying to gain stimulus control, and we're looking at someone being able to determine the difference between cars and trucks. Okay. And let's say that we're starting with all just cars, and we're looking for the learner to identify, yes, that's a car, or no, that's not a car. Okay, and for our sample stimuli of cars, we use all Toyotas. And for our distractor stimuli, or our stimuli that are not cars, that are trucks, we use all Fords. It's possible that we could have the learner that focuses in on the minute feature of the emblem, the Toyota emblem, versus the Ford emblem. Okay, and as a result, that's essentially what ends up acquiring stimulus control. It's this minute feature of the stimulus. But now we've got an issue, because Toyota also makes trucks, and Ford also makes cars. So we're going to have an issue where the learner has potentially selected one small element of that compound stimulus, or those compound stimuli, and it impacts the stimulus control that we're looking for. We can also have issues with stimulus blocking and overshadowing. And with blocking, sometimes also referred to as masking, a competing stimulus that's present in the environment may block the evocative function of the discriminative stimulus. And an example that's used for this sometimes is we may have a situation where we have a student that we're looking to engage in some kind of academic responding in class, and the student is able to do that, has the skill set, and when that student is alone with the teacher, maybe even is able to do it readily. But you put that student in a classroom full of other students, potentially some of that student's friends, and let's say that all of a sudden it's not cool to be providing the answers to the questions that the teacher is asking, because there are other kids present, and so now the student does not engage in the response, because those competing stimuli of that student's friends are present in the environment. We can also have overshadowing, and this is where the most salient aspect of a compound stimulus acquires stimulus control and interferes with the acquisition of stimulus control by the more relevant aspect of the stimulus. Okay, and let's say, for an example for this overshadowing, let's say that we're working on letter identification, and we're using flashcards, and the flashcards that we purchased on Amazon or whatever are designed to be visually appealing and engaging, and so the letter A is in red, and it has a picture of an apple behind it, and the letter B is in blue, and it has a picture of a ball behind it, and we work on that, trying to establish stimulus control. You know, this touch A, touch B, and we have a learner who's reliably doing it. Yep, when I say touch A, they touch the A flashcard. When I say touch B, they touch the B flashcard. Okay, but now we go out and we try to do it with novel stimuli that don't have colors attached to them, don't have the pictures attached to them, and all of a sudden the learner doesn't have it. Okay, and it's entirely possible that what actually acquired stimulus control is not the shape of the letter, which is really the most relevant aspect of the stimulus. It's the color of it. What's acquired stimulus control for touch A is the color red, or the picture of the apple. And what's acquired for touch B is not the shape of the letter B, which is what's important. It's the fact that it's blue, or the picture of the ball behind it. So just a couple of things that can impact our development of stimulus control, and we have to be really careful that we're guarding against when we're looking to establish stimulus control. All right, thank you very much, and I will talk to you all soon.